All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's event. Welcome to this month's Portals Community Call. It's great to have you all with us. And as we get started, just a couple of notes. I'm Jason Gumbert from MS Dynamics World, and I am here with the team from Engineered Code. We have Jacob Chapman, who will be joining us to present in a few minutes on today's featured topic. And we also have Nicholas Hayduke, as always. We do want your questions today, so please do enter them at any time. We'll be keeping an eye on those. And we also are recording today's event, so we'll be making that available after the session ends if you miss any part of it. So with that, I think we can move things ahead. And Nick, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. We've got a guest presenter today because this is not my personal area of expertise, but it's a super important area, and that is accessibility in general and specifically with Power Pages. So welcome everyone, and let's get started. Quick introduction. If this is your first time joining us, my name is Nicholas Hayduke, President and Software Engineer at Engineered Code Consulting Inc., based here in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I've been working with the Power Pages product for the last 15 years or so. My career began at ADX Studio, which was the company that originally built what's now known as Power Pages. So at Engineered Code, we offer consulting services, helping partners and customers all over the world with Power Pages implementations. We've also got EC Learn, which is our learning management system built right into the Power Platform as a solution that goes into Dataverse. So those are our focuses at the moment. If we're not already connected on LinkedIn, please feel free to reach out that way. You can also follow us on our Twitter or X account. We've got our blog that we post about once a month. We've also got our YouTube channel where we post not only the recordings of these calls, but also we have our weekly tips. So that's kind of a 1 to 2 to 3 minute video on various Power Pages tips. I think we're in the 330 range. I just recorded a few more earlier this week, as well as the Refresh the Cache podcast that I co-host with George Dubinsky. And that's available at crm.audio. So lots of ways to get in touch if you are interested in our Power Pages content. As always, just want to say thank you to Jason and the team at MS Dynamics World for their support of these calls as we get into, I think, 60 something we're into now over the last 5 years or so. So it's been a great partnership, and really appreciate all the support they've given to us and the entire kind of Microsoft business applications space. Okay, in terms of our agenda, we're going to kind of keep it the same as typical. We got a little bit of Portals news, and then we're going to kind of give Jacob as much time as we can for his accessibility because it is a bit of there's a lot of stuff to cover there. We'll then talk about the date and time of our next community call, and there'll be an option or some time at the end for Q&A if you do have any kind of questions related to either today's topic or anything kind of in general about Power Pages. So, what news do we have? Relatively light. We've got three news items that have come up since we last gathered about a month ago. As to be expected, lots of AI stuff. In the last month or so, Microsoft has announced that Power Pages AI usage, analytics and governance stuff is in the Copilot hub. So that's, I believe, in the Power Platform Admin Center. And so basically, if you're using some of the AI features of Power Pages, you can see some of the usage analytics and governance stuff in the Copilot hub. There are two new components available. One is the AI-powered search, and the other one is the AI-powered summary components in the Power Pages Studio. So when we talk about components, those are when you're building one of your, if you're building a page and you kind of hit the plus button and you have all the options of you want to add a list or a form or what are the different kind of building blocks you have for your for your web pages. Now you're going to see a few more options. One is the, again, AI-powered search, so basically being able to add a search box that uses the AI-powered search capabilities. So you can kind of do that with a, right in the kind of the WYSIWYG, the editor that we have in the Power Pages Design Studio. And the other one is the summary component. So the summary lets you has AI generate a summary of the page that you're on. So whether it's a form or if there's a bunch of content, if you want a quick summary of kind of what's on this page, um, then you can do that. The last one is enable natural language search for lists in Power Pages. So natural language search is, if you're looking at a list that has maybe say order information, you can say, show me all the orders that are bigger than, $500. You can do those types of things, and it's going to filter that list down for you using natural language. So that one's in preview, as well as the AI usage analytics and governance. That's also in preview. But as you can see, to no one's surprise, the focus is on AI capabilities for Power Pages, and that's the news that we have for this particular month. Okay, so I am going to hand things off to my colleague, Jacob Chapman. He's presented at least one of these calls in the past. He's worked on a number of projects where accessibility has been top of mind, to say the least. And like I said, this isn't necessarily my area of expertise, so I thought I'd bring in the guy who's been living and breathing it over the last few years. And like I said, it's a super important topic. So I will like to bring in Jacob Chapman, and go ahead, Jacob, take it away.
All right, thank you, Nick.
Hey, I just while we're doing this transition, guys, I just want a little technical check. I saw someone mention they couldn't see the screen. I could see the screen, but if others aren't, please put something into the questions and let us know. I'm seeing it again now for from Jacob's screen, I think.
Yeah.
But if anyone else could just confirm for us, that would be great. I think I see it, Jacob, so I think you can move
Yeah,
ahead. But
I see it as well. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if there's any issues, just let me know.
yeah,
All right. Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to today's Portals community call. My name is Jacob Chapman, and today I'm really excited to walk you through a topic that's often overlooked, but it's super important, which is accessibility, and specifically how it applies to Power Pages, what Microsoft gives you, and what you need to do as a developer or an implementer to build inclusive, usable portals. If you've ever built a portal that looked great but didn't quite feel right when navigating with a keyboard or using a screen reader, you're in the right place. All right. So before we dive into techniques and fixes, we got to start with some basics. So what is accessibility, and what do we mean when we talk about things like the WCAG, the AODA, or the ADA? If you're not familiar with those terms, don't worry. This slide will give us the foundation we need for the rest of this presentation. So accessibility, or the A11Y, that's shorthand with 11 letters between the A and Y, refers to designing digital experiences so that everyone can access and use them regardless of ability. It includes people who are blind or visually impaired. These users would use screen readers. Or deaf or hard of hearing users would rely on captions or transcripts. Mobility impaired would be using keyboard only or assistive switches. And neurodivergent or cognitively impaired users would need clear, structured content. So let's unpack a few of these acronyms. So the WAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is the international standard for accessible design. It outlines success criteria like, all images must have alt text, or text must have sufficient color contrast. And there's a whole piece, like there's tons of documentation on this, but there's like levels, so it comes in like A, double A, or triple A, and most organizations would aim for the WCAG 2.1 double A. And I did reference this as well if you wanted to take a look. Then there's the AODA, which is the Accessibility for Ontarians with the Disabilities Act, which is a provincial law in Ontario, Canada, and it requires organizations, including websites, to be accessible by default. So public sectors would already be held to these standards, and private organizations are catching up. And then in the United States, there's the ADA, which is the Americans with the Disabilities Act, which is a U.S. federal law that includes digital accessibility. And yeah, this is especially important in education, healthcare, and retail. So when I say accessibility, I'm talking about building a Power Pages site in a way that wouldn't exclude people, whether intentionally or accidentally. And while the legal stuff is important, it's really about empathy and inclusion. If someone can't access your site without using a mouse, that would be a barrier. If a screen reader can't announce a modal or a form, that's also a barrier. And removing those barriers is what we're here to talk about. So why does accessibility matter? Um, First and foremost, accessibility is about people. We build digital experiences that should work for everyone, regardless of their abilities. That includes users with visual impairments, motor challenges, cognitive differences, or people who just happen to be navigating your site with a keyboard or a screen reader. It's not a niche problem. About 1 in 5 people globally live with a disability. So if we're ignoring accessibility, we're ignoring a huge portion of our potential audience. And there's also the legal side of things mentioned previously. In many regions, accessibility is no longer optional, it's a requirement. Whether that's the AODA in Ontario, the ADA in the US, or uh, organizations are increasingly being held accountable for digital compliance. But beyond laws and ethics, accessibility just makes products better for everyone. Think of features like closed captions, dark mode, or voice to text. These started as accessibility features, but are now mainstream because they help all users. One thing we've seen in our Power Pages work is that accessibility issues often overlap with usability issues. If something is hard to use with a keyboard or a screen reader, chances are it's not great for mouse users either. So fixing accessibility often means you're improving overall UX. And finally, accessibility is part of being a professional. As devs and designers, we have these tools to make things more inclusive, and it's our job to use them. So let's zoom in a little bit. Power Pages is a powerful tool. It lets us build secure, scalable, mobile-friendly portals on top of Dataverse. And for organizations that rely on Dynamics or the Power Platform, that's huge. With relatively little effort, you can expose data safely to external users, customize interfaces, and roll out solutions quickly. But here's the thing, Power Pages is still a web platform. Underneath all the low-code tools, templates, you're still working with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Liquid. It's a website, just a specialized one. And that means accessibility is still your job. Now, Microsoft gives you a solid starting point. Most of the out-of-the-box components like your forms, lists, and grids are generally decent when it comes to accessibility. They've made improvements to semantic markup, ARIA attributes, and keyboard support. But the moment you start adding, custom JavaScript or custom code, any custom modals, like overriding styles, or any third-party components, that's when you're in charge. The framework won't stop you from introducing inaccessible experiences. That's on us. And to be clear, this isn't about bad intentions. Accessibility issues don't usually happen because someone set out to break something. They happen because we don't think to test, or we assume things just work out of the box, or we're rushing to meet a deadline. So in reality, Power Pages won't stop you from failing accessibility tests, but it also won't stop you from doing it right. So let me ask you something real quick. Think back to the last portal or website you built. Really think about it. Like, did you test it with a keyboard only? Did you try navigating with a screen reader? Did you test the color contrast? Did you try zooming into the page with 200% and seeing if that layout holds up? Did you check if the tab order made sense? Most developers haven't done these things, and that's okay. This is often uncharted territory that we think about. But if your portal is going to be used by the public, especially by governments, educational institutions, for example, you're probably legally and morally required to care. So the big picture is this: Power Pages makes accessibility possible, but you have to make it happen. All right. So what are some common accessibility challenges in Power Pages? So firstly, there is improper tab order. Keyboard users rely on tabbing to navigate your page. If you've got multiple web forms, custom modals, or JavaScript UI elements, tabbing can jump unpredictably, or worse, just disappear. Second is custom JavaScript hijacking default behavior. When we use jQuery or vanilla JavaScript to show and hide elements, we often forget about focus management. We might toggle visibility, but forget to send that focus to the newly visible content, leaving keyboard or screen reader users stranded. Um, Even a simple, like if you wrote in your code like element.focus, it can make a huge difference, but it has to be intentional. Third is missing or incorrect ARIA attributes. This one is subtle. If your modal doesn't have like a role equals dialogue placement, or it doesn't have an ARIA labeled by, a screen reader has no idea what just popped up. It's like walking into a room with the lights off and no idea where the walls are. Fourth is focus traps. This is probably one of the most frustrating issues for users. A modal opens and now your keyboard users can't tab out of it. You're trapped in a loop of 3 buttons with no way to close it using your keyboard. It's not just annoying, it's a complete blocker. If your portal uses modals or pop-ups, which many do, you have to implement proper focus trap behavior with an escape route. And finally, error messages and validation summaries. Many custom forms will display validation errors visually, but screen readers won't pick them up unless they're in an ARIA live region or explicitly connected to the input fields. A user can fill out a whole form, hit submit, and hear nothing. So these are the issues we'll dive deeper into. And remember, they're all fixable, it just takes intention. So what does Microsoft give you? Before we talk about Microsoft's Power Pages product team has made great strides in accessibility. We have semantic HTML, form labels, and built-in ARIA support. So when you're using the Design Studio, the components like your headers, buttons, and forms are generated with the appropriate roles and tags. And it's using the WCAG 2.1 guidance in newer templates. And there's also the Power Pages Site Checker tool, which is now in preview, and it can analyze your portal and flag potential accessibility violations like missing alt text or low contrast. So if you're starting fresh, especially with a standard template, you're in a pretty solid place. But as soon as you deviate, which many of us would do, by adding custom JavaScript, styling, that baseline accessibility can degrade quickly. So if we can't rely entirely on the platform, we have to understand how our customizations impact that user experience. So before we go in a little bit deeper, let's quickly talk about something that shows up a lot in accessibility, ARIA. And I've mentioned this a handful of times already now. So ARIA stands for the Accessible Rich Internet Applications. It's a specification created by the W3C, and it gives us a way to make dynamic content, things like modals, tabs, drop-downs, tooltips, understandable to assistive technologies like screen readers. Normally, HTML handles accessibility well if you use semantic tags, which, for example, a button tag is already accessible. It can be clicked, focused, and read properly. But the second you replace a button, let's say for a div, styled to look like a button, that's when you've broken accessibility, unless you use ARIA to add the right roles and attributes back in. So here's what ARIA can let you do. So if you can use role equals button or role equals dialogue to describe what an element is. Use ARIA label to give an accessible name to something that has no visible text. Use ARIA hidden equals true to hide elements from screen readers. Use ARIA expanded to indicate the state of a collapsible menu. And use ARIA Live for dynamic content updates like error messages or success banners. But here's the key rule. Don't use ARIA if native HTML can do the job. If ARIA is there to patch gaps when regular HTML can't express what something already is. So what are you responsible for? Layout and structure. It's easy to build a page that looks good, but doesn't follow a logical heading or section structure. Avoid the temptation to use divs everywhere. Instead, lean on those semantic elements like your sections, buttons, articles, your nav tags, and all your appropriate heading levels. That gives screen readers a map of your content, not just a sea of divs, or better known as div soup. Second is JavaScript interactions. As soon as we start to show and hide content, open dialogues, or create accordions, we need to manage the focus, roles, and those ARIA attributes. A button that opens a custom modal needs ARIA-has pop-up. The modal needs role dialog, and it needs an ARIA labeled by. and focus should shift into the modal, then back when it does, or when it closes, sorry. Third is keyboard support. So test everything with your keyboard. Like literally unplug your mouse and see what happens. If you can't reach a button, toggle a tab, or exit a pop-up, neither can your users. Error messages and screen reader support. So when something goes wrong, say a required field is left empty, you need to announce that. This is where that ARIA Live this is where ARIA Live equals polite, or associating error labels with form fields becomes crucial. So bottom line, Microsoft gives you a solid scaffold, but your work determines whether that scaffold becomes a building or a trap. So what are some of the things that we've done at Engineered Code? The first example is, we've fixed tabbing on list view action buttons. One of the projects that I worked on, and actually the demo that I'll be presenting today, is the modern list view in Power Pages doesn't have accessible action buttons at the top. And we've fixed the tabbing issues on those buttons. Another thing that we've done is implementing focus traps in modals. This focus traps in modals are the bane of every accessibility developer's existence. When modals break keyboard navigation, I think the one example I can think of was we had a page where users could open a modal. Let's say I think it was to view a record details, and visually everything looked fine, but when you tried to navigate it with a keyboard, it was just chaos. Another fix, we fixed screen readers and keyboard focus, visual indicators all across the board. All right, so now that I'm done speaking for a little bit on the slides, let's transition over to a demo. And I'm just gonna close my slides real quick. And how do I start? Oh, here we go. Why is that being goofy? Okay. So the demonstration that I'm going to be doing today is accessibility on a web page that has a list view with the modern list view control, and how accessibility isn't there for these action buttons. So I'm just going to go back to my home page, for example. It's just a blank portal with a very simple list view that I have that I've configured to use the modern list view. And just quickly, in order to toggle the modern list view, you simply just go to the designer, and then I think you just hit edit list here, and this preview. Try the new and improved version of this component. So you can toggle this on or off, and visually the list will update accordingly. So I did have, okay, so on this page we have a simple list view of contacts. And what I want to demonstrate is tabbing will skip over these three buttons. So I'm just using my mouse right now. So these will work as they should. But as soon as I start to tab through my page, so we can see here I'm tabbing through here, accessibility, here, just through the header. So as soon as I land on my name, the next focusable element should be this create button. But instead, it skips these entirely. And a question you might have is, well, can you just use your arrow keys? No. You can't. I'm trying to use my arrow keys right now, and there is no possibility of me getting to these buttons. So if I unplug my mouse right now, I couldn't create a record. I couldn't change my view. I'm kind of just stuck, and that's a blocker for users who just use keyboard navigation. So the demo I'm going to be doing today is kind of running through a live tutorial on how to use JavaScript to fix the tabbable action items here. So I'm just going to open up here. I already have this tab open, but in my Visual Studio Code interface, I'm on my one inaccessible page. I just have like a bare bones JavaScript file here, and I'm just going to start writing code to hopefully fix these tabbable buttons. Because I'll just start writing code, and I'll as I'm going through this, I will walk you through what I'm doing, why I'm writing what I'm doing. All right. So the first thing we want to do is we want to instantiate something called an observer, which if you've never heard of these before, I will explain what these are. So a mutation observer basically checks the DOM, a specific part of the DOM if you want, and what it'll do is it'll check for any updates to the DOM, like anything that gets added as an object to the tree, and it'll run this code when that happens. So we're going to instantiate this observer, and I can hover over here and it'll explain it better. So it provides the ability to watch for changes being made to the DOM tree. Yeah, basically it all is. And the reason I'm doing this is because on load, this list view isn't going to be there yet. So I'm going to be waiting for the DOM tree to add this list to the page, and it'll run this observer to say, hey, like once this list is loaded, check to see if these buttons are there, and then do some logic to fix that accessibility issue. So this is kind of just like your boilerplate code for observers. This is our object that we want to be observing on. So the document.body and child list. True. All right, so there's our boilerplate code for the observer. And now what we want to do is find the buttons that we want to fix. So it's going to be this button, and this drop down as well. So let's just check to see, how can we target these buttons using JavaScript? And there's common things in the DOM tree on these buttons that we can target to make sure we get everything that we need. So one thing is so here's the entire bar. That blue outline is exactly what we want to target in terms of like a container. So we want that, and we'll also just zoom in a little bit here. We have ms-command bar item. We want to target this bar, this ms-command bar, and then subsequently finding all the buttons in here. So the buttons here, we can see we have an attribute called data is focusable equals true. So that looks like something that we can probably target in our JavaScript. Same thing here, data is focusable true. And then let's just inspect this. Should have the same thing. Data is focusable equals true. So we have three things in common. So we're going to write some JavaScript to target that. So let's do const buttons equals. So we're just going to use jQuery notation to target these things. So the first thing we want to target is the command bar. And then as a child node, we want to find those buttons where data is focusable. Oh, I'm missing a word. Data is focusable equals true. All right, so that's our buttons. Now, in this bar here, there's actually going to be a hidden button in here, and we don't really need to do anything with it, so we're going to filter it out. So we're just going to write some logic here just to get rid of it, essentially. So we'll just do return this dot offset parent is not equal to null. So this will filter out that one extra button that we don't really need. And then just for buttons, and we'll just get this to an array. Okay, and then the next thing we want to do is we want to check and see if there's at least two buttons. We don't need this logic, but I'll just have it for funsies. We'll do if buttons dot length is greater than or equal to 2. We will then, do something. This is where we want to actually write our logic to fix the buttons that aren't tappable. And after we do our logic, we basically want to disconnect the observer. So we'll do observer.disconnect. Again, just boilerplate code. Inside your observer, you want to disconnect it at some point. All right, so here's our basic functionality for an observer. Now we're going to actually write the function to instantiate some sort of tabbing logic. And this is going to be a little bit overkill, but we're going to do a trap focus. So we'll call it setup trap focus. And we're going to pass in our buttons. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we need an attribute called tab index equals 0. So that's the first thing we want to add to these buttons. So if I inspect these buttons right now, we can see here, so they have tab index equals 0 on them. This one doesn't, so that's a problem. So tab index, what that allows you to do is basically be able to tab to it. So 0 means it's tabbable, and -1 means it's not allowed to be tabbed into at all. And so that they should be zeros because we want to be able to navigate through this. So that's the first thing we want to do is we'll just do buttons.attr. So this is jQuery's function of targeting an attribute, and we want to find tab index, and we're just going to set them all to 0. And then that'll be fine. All right, next is, we don't have to do this, but optionally what we're going to do is add some screen reader support. So we're going to find some, we're just going to add some logic to help screen readers out by adding some ARIA labels. So we'll do, we're going to need some variables here. So first button, we'll just set this to this, buttons at index 0. And const. We'll get the outer container as well. First button dot closest. So this is going to go up so the closest function while I'm writing this out is going to look up the DOM tree. So looking at that first button, it's going to traverse up the tree to find the closest element with the class command bar. And then we'll just get that. So that gives us that. All right, so then we're going to have some logic here to say if the container exists, basically, container.length. Then we're going to add container.attr again. And we're going to target the ARIA label attribute. And if this attribute doesn't exist already on that element, it's just going to create it. So this will help screen readers out. And if we were to use the screen reader support or any sort of visual tool, or not visual, like an assistive tool to help us here for these elements, this is what it would say. So it would say command bar, use tab to move between actions. So that just helps out our screen readers. And then the next piece of logic is actually listening for that event where we're pressing the tab key. So we'll do document.on down function e will just give us all of the properties of the button that we've pressed on our keyboard. So on key down, basically we want to ignore every key except for the tab key. So if e.key is not equal to tab, we want to just return. We don't want to execute any further if the key isn't the tab key. And then subsequently, we want to find the active element. So we're just going to instantiate a variable document.activeElement. And then we want to find also the button index that we're currently on. So we want to do buttons.index of current. So if the button index, or if the focused element, isn't one of our buttons, we also want to return. We don't care about anything but our buttons that we've passed into this function. So button index is equal to -1, we simply just want to exit. All right, so the next piece of logic that we want to do is it's going to be we need to think about this in two circumstances. So if the person is traversing backwards, so shift tab, or forward, so just tabbing through. So we need to add some logic to say, or let's just have some console logs to show what's actually happening. So if e.shift key, and this is a property just on the event itself, so this will be true or false, and button index is equal to 0. So the button, if the button index is 0, that means we're on the first button, and we just want to have a console log that says, oh, we're leaving command bar backwards. So I just want to see what would happen once we leave the bar, in both forwards and backwards. So I can just copy this logic. Oh, we also need a return statement. All right, so, and then this will be forwards. Oh, and then we want the convert. So if the shift key wasn't pressed, and this, instead of the first button, it'll be the last button. So buttons.length -1, because it's a 0th based index. And then lastly, we want to do e.prevent default, which will just override any behavior. And then after, we want to do const next index equals e.shift key. So what we're trying to achieve here is finding out what that next index is. So this is it's a one line of code that kind of handles the traversal. So we have so we're going to check, is the shift key pressed, meaning they're going backwards. Then what we want to do is we want to subtract the button index. Otherwise, it means they're going forward. So it's just going to be button index +1. And then all we have to do is target our buttons with the parameter of the next index. And we just want to, and there's a jQuery function just called .focus. And this will focus that particular element. And that is all of the code we need to hopefully have this work. Now, we have our function, but we didn't call it yet. So this is where the observer comes in. So the observer, again, checks for any changes to the DOM tree. And we're just going to call that function once it notices that, oh, we have our buttons loaded. Let's call that function. So let's just do this, and then passing in our buttons. And I'll just get rid of this comment. Now, if I save this, hopefully, this should just work. And I'm going to clear my cache. Oh, I don't know why it's taking so long. It's always fun. And don't mind, don't mind the date being incorrect there at the top. Just ignore that. All right, so, as we saw earlier, it was just skipping over this. So hopefully now we can see it tab through properly, and it's not. Why is that happening? I'm probably getting some sort of error, I imagine. Let's see. No errors. Why? Let's see what's going on here. Okay, so no console logs are being generated. Yeah. Should be all we need. Why would it? Just trying to see here. Am I not targeting the wonder if this, let's just see here. Am I able to, okay, so I'm getting that. And then checking to see if the button length, interesting, why that wouldn't run. Let's see. Maybe I'm just on the wrong page. No, okay. And that is super bizarre. Well, anyways, that should be working. I'm not too sure why. I'm just gonna see. Let's clear the cache again. I'm assuming it's some sort of typo, but I do have a working page with this. So let's see why that wouldn't. This should be right now. Okay, must have been I don't know what that was, but that is all the code to get this working. So you can see here now, if I go back to if I hover over my name, you can see that I'm focused on there. And if I hit tab, it'll now go into the create button. And then if I hit tab again, it'll go to the download button. And if I go to the console, you can see that I have the console log set up here. So you can see if I leave the command bar, it says leaving command bar forwards, and then leaving the command bar backwards. So again, apologies for the demo there. There must have just been a typo in my code somewhere. Yeah, some sort of issue there. But nonetheless, that was my demonstration for fixing the accessibility portion for the command bar action items. And one more thing that I'm not going to do a live demo of, but another thing that keyboard users have an issue with is resizing the column headers. So there's no way that a keyboard user can use their keyboard and a keyboard user cannot resize any of these columns. It's a blocker for them. So if they let's say, for example, like my email is cut off, like there's no way for a keyboard user to see that fully. Like there's no way for me to resize this. So that would be an accessibility option where you would have to implement custom styling, custom buttons to resize these column headers. So I'll show you that as well. I'm not going to show you the code for it, but I will just show you briefly here. So if I tab into these column headers, you can see here I have a minus and a plus button. So this would be an accessibility feature where a user can hit the enter key, hit the minus button, and be able to see the full column header in its entirety and be able to see that data. So yeah, that was my demo. I will come back to the slides now. Let's see. All right. So just to wrap up my presentation, so some things on the dev checklist. When you're working on Power Pages, having a repeatable accessibility checklist can, save you a ton of time and catch most of the major issues before your users even see them. So, always use semantic HTML, buttons, labels, headers, etc. Avoid using divs or spans for things that are meant to be interactive. If you have to, use that role equals button or ARIA attributes to describe the purpose. Label everything properly. Inputs need labels. If you're using a visual only label, connect it with that ARIA labeled by or ARIA label to help your screen readers out. And this goes for buttons, toggles, drop downs, and file uploads. Use ARIA Live for dynamic content. Test with a keyboard. You'd be surprised how many things break when you unplug your mouse. Can you reach every button? Does focus behave intuitively? And then screen reader testing, even light testing. So there are tools out there for screen readers, and there's one built into Windows machines called Narrator. I would recommend just even using that to test, and it works very well. So so here's some of the tools that I found online that these are pretty common tools. And the first one is the Axe Dev Tools, which is a browser extension. You can click a button and it scans your page for any accessibility issues. It gives you some feedback. There's also the Wave accessibility checker. It's great to see, where labels are missing or headers are out of order. It's good for spot checking, during your development. Then there's the NVDA, which is the non-visual desktop access. That's a free open source screen reader tool. It's great for testing, how your content sounds. And then there's obviously the Power Pages site checker, which I mentioned earlier. Yeah, so but just to clarify, none of these replace user testing, but they do help you catch things early, and they're a great way to help build up your accessibility instincts when developing. All right, so just to wrap up my presentation, I just want to leave you with some takeaways. So accessibility is about people, not checklists. Every fix you make isn't for a scanner or some compliance report. It's for a real user who's trying to use your site, without frustration. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening and watching.
All right, thank you, Jacob. Yeah, everyone loves live coding. I know it can be a bit of a pain, but you'll always get lots of kudos from the community anytime you're brave enough to write some code while everyone's watching. Um, Let me see here. I don't know if there were any questions that are still outstanding. Let me see here. What's Tino? So Tino says, I haven't landed a customer project to fix accessibility. Only how do offer this commercialization analysis upfront or fixing? Yeah, I mean, in our experience, I mean, you kind of need an almost unlimited budget to, there's no such thing as like a perfectly accessible site, and it can literally go on for days, weeks, months. Um, so often what we'll say is it's like, hey, we've planned for X number of hours on this project to kind of squash as many of the bugs as we can, or deal with the high priority items. But yeah, I mean, honestly, you can kind of it's always changing, so it's like there's just never a finish line. So yes, from a commercial perspective, it can be quite tricky to um, you know guarantee any sort of accessibility. So it's more of a best effort. You can catch, it's kind of one of those 80/20 things, right? You can be very compliant with a relatively small effort, but to be for that last 20% can take a lot of effort, because I mean, as you've seen, as Jacob demonstrated today, it's not an insignificant amount of code just because there's no tabbing on those buttons, and there are many different examples of that. Yeah, just other kudos. So I will open up the floor if you have any questions about this topic or any other topic related to Power Pages. We'd be happy to take that now. Um, Here, let me just share my screen so we can talk about um, the next call here. Just gotta click the right buttons. Share screen. Yeah, so the next call is scheduled for July 31st. Same time, same place. Let's see here. And as always, thanks to Jason and the team at MS Dynamics World. I will open it up I'll do one more check here on the Q&A side of things. Yeah, I'm just seeing some comments about how awesome this was, and how in the UK it's very important. As Jacob was mentioning, like in Canada here, that Ontario, even though we're not necessarily based in Ontario, we do work for some Ontario clients, but in similar ways where in the US, like if California makes a law, basically everyone just kind of ends up following it. Ontario is kind of like that in Canada, so a lot of the provinces kind of look towards that Ontario Disabilities Act as kind of the gold standard in Canada as to what to be accessible. If you meet their guidelines, then you're probably in a pretty good spot. So I don't see any additional questions, Jason. So I think we can probably wrap it up there. Again, thank you, Jacob. Incredibly important topic. Can be a tricky one, but thank you for sharing your experience on this topic for the community. That was a great session. So, Jason, I think we can probably wrap it up there.
All right, yeah. Just add my thanks to you, Jacob. Great job, and thanks everyone for being here. We will be in touch soon with access to the recording, and we'll see you next month. Bye, everyone.